Let's recap now the main points. 85,000 people remain under evacuation orders and warnings in New South Wales as that severe weather system shifts to the mid-north coast. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will tour flood-affected parts of the state with the Premier. We are expecting that at some point today. The Commonwealth has announced disaster payments, which will be available from tomorrow at 2 p.m. for 23 local government areas.
The Australian Government has approved our disaster recovery payments to kick in from 2 o'clock tomorrow. That will consist of $1,000 for adults that are impacted and eligible for these payments, $400 for every child who is eligible for this. The disaster recovery allowance will also be made available to assist employees and sole traders.
A total of 164 flood evacuation orders and warnings remain across the state. New orders have been issued for Combo, Whittingham, Scott's Flat, Glenridding and Dunolly. Late last night, New South Wales SES in the Hunter region issued urgent advice for Broke and Bulga and Wallumbee. But in several areas, it is too late for people to leave those isolated parts. Floods have cut off the historic town of Broke. 23 local government areas have been declared natural disaster zones, which frees up payments and loans for people affected. But the Deputy Liberal leader, Susan Lee, says more needs to be done.
This is awful for people who've gone through this, in some cases 3 times. And, you know, it's re-traumatising every time this happens for them. The real anxiety. So these emergency payments are the first step, and then the government needs to consider, as all governments should, what happens next to best support people who have been through multiple floods, to really protect them, to really make them feel secure.
And more evacuation orders have been issued as rivers rise in the flood emergency. Christy Lloyd is in Windsor, northwest of Sydney. Christy, what are conditions like there at the moment?
Well, thankfully, we're starting to see the river levels receding here at Windsor. For the Hawkesbury-Nepean Valley, this is now the worst flooding disaster that we've seen since 1978. The situation is even worse, though, for some areas just downstream of Windsor, regions such as Sackville and Lower Portland experiencing their worst flooding since 1964. Although the river levels are receding, they're doing so very, very slowly. One thing I can note, though, is that it seems to be a lot calmer along the Hawkesbury River this morning as the wet weather really starts to ease. We've still got a few showers this morning, but they're fairly light falls at the moment. The river's certainly not flowing as fast as what it has been in the last couple of days. Many residents here have just been watching and waiting. I was speaking to one resident earlier who said that although it was a nervous wait to see just how high the river levels were going to get, it's now almost even just as nerve-wracking to watch these river levels slowly recede, knowing that they have such a massive clean-up ahead in the coming weeks and even months, and they were only just recovering from the last floods back in March and April. So this region has been hit very, very hard. We are starting to see river levels rising as well around Wiseman's Ferry, just downstream of Windsor, and we are expecting to see a major flood peak there sometime today. And authorities are urging that although the regions around some of the Hawkesbury-Nepean Valley area are seeing these flood levels subside, they're really urging residents not to become complacent.
In some good news, the rain is starting to ease across Sydney and those floodwaters are just starting to recede. But all of the river systems right across the Sydney Basin are still full, and many of them still at a major flood level.
The New South Wales SES has advised that some residents around the southwestern suburbs of Sydney that were affected by flooding may be able to return to their homes at some point today, but they will do so cautiously and only after the State Emergency Service has conducted checks in that region. While residents may be able to return to their homes in the southwest of Sydney, further north we have evacuation orders continuing across parts of the Central Coast and Hunter region. In particular, of concern at the moment is the township of Broke. Authorities are urging residents to leave as soon as possible or remain in place if it is not safe to leave, and to contact the SES and the State Emergency Services if they do remain in place, as that is becoming a life-threatening emergency for the town of Broke. We also have major flooding occurring around the Central Coast, around Tuggerah Lakes, particularly for the area of Long Jetty. Last night there were a number of air rescues performed to evacuate residents from that region. So although we are seeing an easing trend across parts of the Greater Sydney region, the situation unfortunately is worsening for parts of the Hunter. We also have heavy rain forecast further north today along parts of the mid-north coast, including for areas such as Coffs Harbour and Port Macquarie, where flash flooding will be a risk. We could see some river level rises there, but it's only likely to be minor or moderate flooding in those regions. Downed trees and power outages will also be a risk throughout the remainder of the day.
OK, Christy Lloyd live in Windsor. Thank you for the update.